Now, Edgar Fouché a couple years ago talked about the TR3B. The TR3B is this large triangle. What he said about it, which I found interesting, is that the TR3B apparently has quasi-crystals on its surface, which allows it to look like a Cessna or a flock of geese to someone's radar scope. So apparently what he told us at that presentation, if it's true, and there's apparently a lot of evidence coming out now about these flying triangles, even on the ABC show recently, is that the flying triangles use crystalline technology, but what Edgar Fouché said was that it's highly classified. Of course, it's black budget research. But see, what we're finding out through the remote viewing research that's been done is that this crystallinity has a lot of different applications, and if it was working, we wouldn't know about it. Now, just as an aside, I saw something like this fly over this hotel a couple years ago at about 2 a.m. in the morning. I never thought I'd see a UFO at a UFO conference. It was the biggest sighting I had. I saw it with Denny Clark. We were coming back at 2 a.m. in the morning from the petroglyph monument by Christmas Tree Pass, and she said, "What's that?" And we looked. It wasn't this. It was the cousin. I think it's called the TR3A. It's like a boomerang shape, completely silent, very large, probably spanned the width of the river, only a couple hundred feet up, went right over the hotels. It was gone before I could get the camcorder out. But nonetheless, so I've actually seen one of these, and if it used quasi-crystals like Edgar Fouché said it did, I wouldn't be surprised. But this is what quasi-crystals look like. And again, we found that this type of pattern is also very important to the crop circle shapes, and this is why we think that crop circles and remote viewing resonance are connected topics. So again, we're capable of receiving energy and transmitting energy, transforming energy through spirals, through shapes. It's just built into who we are. We're naturally magical beings. We just have to get in touch with that magical side of ourselves. We have to work at it. We've been conditioned not to pay attention to it. Hundreds of years ago, not that long ago, people were burnt at the stake for doing this. Even in our own country, people were killed and labeled as witches in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. So it's no wonder that some of us have this bias or fear of psychic functioning, telepathy, whatever you'd like to call it. But in my view, it's simply an advanced form of physics that is yet to be discovered or thoroughly accepted by the existing scientific institutions. It's real and has been pointed out many times. Until we have a theory that really explains it, the conventional scientific community probably won't want much to do with it because it's not a career builder. But it's reality as far as I'm concerned. Here's a perfect example of that. Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab. They did an experiment for 8 or so years, just with this 1 or 2 devices, I believe, at the Princeton lab. You would sit down at your computer and try to make a random number generator cease to be random. And what they found is after, I believe, 120,000 trials, you can see this right on the graph yourself. If the person tried to make the device go towards 1, you had more 1s than 0s. And if they tried to make it go towards 0s, it deviated away from the average would be 0.5. It's easier for some reason to make it go up from 0 to 1 than below. Nobody knows exactly why. It's easier to make it go towards 1 than to 0. This device apparently just senses some random radiation in the atmosphere. It transfers that and transforms that to a series of 1s and 0s. If there was no effect, you would just see this green line in the middle. That's no effect. It's just averaging out to 0.5. But here, after 8 years of study, you can clearly see the cumulative results show that, in fact, people's minds from wherever they were on the Earth, it didn't matter where they were, could affect this device. And I'm sure you've heard recently there have also been talk, these devices have now been spread out over the planet as a kind of early warning detection system for events. Now, no one's exactly sure how to interpret the results, but apparently before 9/11, 2 hours before 9/11, these 2 devices, which are normally random, became entrained, and they start acting in synchronicity, which they should not do. They're supposed to be random. And apparently this happened 4 hours or so before the tsunami hit last December. It also, actually, the biggest reading ever was during the verdict of the O.J. Simpson trial. That dwarfed, the 9/11 and tsunami were dwarfed by the O.J. Simpson trial results on the random number generator. Why? Well, that happened all at once. While 9/11 evolved over a period of a couple hours and days, in a sense, and weeks, in some sense it's still going on in terms of our foreign policy, and the tsunami took 10 hours to completely go across to Africa, something like a trial verdict where millions of people are glued to their screen is going to have an immediate effect on our consciousness. And this could be why the devices seem to lose their randomness for brief periods of time during mass, collective, globally conscious events. Nonetheless, this is proof, nonetheless, that that we have the ability to affect things with our mind, or at least, if affect isn't the right word, interact with something at a distance. Now, I want to show you slides of the RV results that we've gotten from years of work at the Institute for Resonance. We will take a picture such as this. We will hide it in a folder. Sometimes it will be double blind, where no one knows what the picture is, and sometimes it will just be single blind, where the viewer doesn't know the picture ahead of time. They're given a sheet of paper and told to describe the target. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, but you can look at them at your leisure on our website, resonantviewing.org. I'll show you the name again at the end. Or you can also find them in Opening Minds. They're pictures of many of the slides we're going to be looking at. So here's a typical picture. It's a picture of a Sherpa or someone in the mountains carrying a big backpack. The viewer is given no information ahead of time, and this is what they're able to get. This is just someone in like their first day of the class. Basically, they were able to describe that it was a kind of a mountainous area. I can't read this very well, but I'll basically do it from memory, from I've read these many times. They were able to describe a temperature of about 40 degrees. You can see the random number coordinates at the top that they're given. And essentially, they do an ideogram, which is basically a shape that they'll draw from their hand, and we'll be doing this a little later. And from that ideogram, it's like a hologram. The whole picture, the whole scene is in that ideogram. And they slowly decode it. It takes a little time to do an RV session, but the time is well spent. And he was able to describe a quiet mountain scene with snow, rough peaks, and coal, and a cliff involved with some trees. I gave him then a session about Cancun, Mexico, and he was able to describe a feeling of a beach, a sky. He thought he saw a 25-foot-long ship. This fellow, by the way, was a missile engineer, former missile engineer. He's very specific. So he was very specific in his data. Not everyone gets exactly specific feet. And he was able to describe a seashore and a beach, blue sky, about 70 degrees. So you see very different targets, very different responses in the RV results. Here is a mother and baby goat. And the viewer was able to describe a feeling of comfort, a natural setting, something that is soft. And at the end, she said, I kept thinking of a mother and a baby deer. Now, the skeptics would say, well, they missed it. It wasn't a mother and a baby deer, but I would say it's pretty close. It literally could have been anything. And they got two animals together. This is how it works. And these are just beginners, people with a couple days of training. And you can do this too. People swimming in some sort of race, it appears. The viewer was able to get a person at the top attempting to keep up, and then in her post-session summary. The post-session summary is the part of the session at the end where you finish the session and you look at what you wrote and just describe it in some sentences about the information that you got during the viewing session. She got a live organic springs up, is launched using a man-made movement. It's graceful. Lots of air-filled sacs like lungs. Balloons, that a feeling of liftoff. Fleshy pink colors and an effort to keep up. Here's a picture of a model on a beach. You notice there's a building in the background, and the viewer was able to get that there's a big building, larger than others, near a beach. People are meandering nearby on a seashore. Beautiful water and some cars nearby. It is near a parking lot. So we would call this 100% target contact. Here is one that Ron did, as he alluded to before. It's a race car. And here's the ideogram. You can see the ideogram. It's just a shape that comes out of your hand. You don't think about it. You just let your hand move and let your subconscious tell you what's at the target site. And he got, in his session here, dull, gray, metallic, about 2 tons. And here's his race car. Now, you notice the shape there is exactly like the shape of the front of the race car. He kind of got it flipped back, but that shape is exactly very similar to what the shape of that race car looks like in the front. So that's what we call, again, very high level of target contact. Now, he stopped the session, ended it right there. He started to draw in a stadium, and his mind said, it can't be a car in a stadium. Your ego tends to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Your ego, which does a basically good job of keeping you alive and taking care of all your appointments and all the logical, rational, linear things in your life, it isn't really good at RV. The linear mind gets about 16 bits per second of information out of about 40 million that go into your brain every second. This is how much you're aware of. Your total sensory awareness consists of 16 bits per second.